So my name is Louise Clarke, and I am an application developer and accessibility advocate with GREYSHORE. I'm also a certified professional in accessibility core competencies. This is a certification that's awarded by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And welcome to Building Commitment to Digital Accessibility in an Enterprise Organization. All right, so I have a bit of housekeeping. First, I am aware that there are no live captions for this presentation. So I do want to say that as soon as I receive the video, I will get a live transcription and captions and display that on hopefully my website, and then also give it back to Fleurix. And if you need that, you can get a hold of me and I'll send it to you. I do have a link of my talk, the PDF for my talk. The PDF has resource links in it, so please feel free to grab it. I don't know if you can because of the light, but the URL is https://Q as in queen, R as in rad, C as in cool, O as in orange, dot, D as in dog, E as in elephant, / GREYSHORE A11Y. Okay, so because this conference is catering to a lot of people new to technology, I want to quickly get a reference to what I mean by accessibility. So digital accessibility means that websites, web applications, tools, and technologies are designed and developed so that people with disabilities can use them. And this is a definition that comes from the W3C's Web Accessibility Initiative site. However, I would really want to add that we shouldn't be just be building for disabled people, but also with people with disabilities. So I have 3 logos here of organizations that can help you. And there may also be people out in the audience who are working for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. If people with disabilities aren't in your hiring practices, if they're not part of your initiatives, if you don't have a culture of accessibility with an accessibility mindset, then really please work on that, because this is one a lot of people consider the largest minority population in the world. It's also a minority population that any one of us can join at any time. So these 3 companies, Pete, hold on just one second, let me start with the Partnership on Inclusive Apprenticeship. They actually will collaborate with employers to help you design inclusive apprenticeships. And then these apprenticeships are given to people with disabilities to help them grow their skill set. The Disability Equality Index, this is a joint initiative with the American Association of People with Disabilities. They will give you a benchmarking score, and then you can kind of build a roadmap to building a sustainable accessibility program. And then there's PETE, or the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology, and their mission is to foster collaboration in technology space. So building inclusive workspaces. They also host the Workology podcast, which go ahead and put that in whatever you have, wherever you're listening. It's a fantastic podcast about trying to build more inclusive workspaces. So a quick slide on the state of web accessibility and digital accessibility. And that is reflected in my facepalm emoji. It's just that it's not exactly where we want it to be. The reason for the facepalm emoji on that slide is that technologists across the board can do a whole lot better by creating digital experiences that remove barriers for people. And so the table on my slide actually hits on some of the top errors that we're seeing. WebAIM, an accessibility software company, They conducted this survey of the top 1 million websites, and the sites are tested for accessibility concerns, and these are some of the top ones. Um, Low contrast text. 86% of home pages had inaccessible text. Missing alt text. 60.6% of web pages had missing alt text on their home page. Missing form input labels. 54%. I mean, that is really huge. Think about how we all registered to get our COVID vaccine online, right? Well, if you've got missing form input labels, you are locking out a whole group of people who are using screen readers, perhaps, to try and register for that vaccine. And then valid table markup. Only 9.2% of websites had valid table markup. So that means the data in that table is not getting communicated effectively. It looks even worse right here. So I want to just not talk about stats. I wanted to look at a live example, and I'm going to pick on Twitter because it's kind of in vogue right now, right? I just wanted to acknowledge that this slide is not accessible by design. It has a white text on a light blue background, which is the Twitter blue, and then a white square with the same blue text. And the text says, just say no, right? Just say no to low contrast text. And I apologize, I didn't realize I was not going to be actually in my browser. So I was going to demonstrate a tool, but I do have a link to it. And this is Deque's Axe DevTools. It's free. They do have a paid version, but the free version is really good to get you going. You could use it on Twitter's website, run a quick scan of the page, and you'll see all sorts of color contrast issues related to Twitter's color blue. And what else is I going to show you? Sorry, I'm kind of I really wanted to show you that very cool tool, but we will continue on. I will, if anybody has questions afterwards, I can demo it on my computer with my hotspot. Okay, so prioritizing digital accessibility for customer experience. So I don't want to be entirely negative, right? And I do want to highlight some positive. And these are really encouraging statistics by Gina Ball-Walker at Forrester. She is an analyst. She speaks regularly about digital accessibility with a variety of companies for her research. And she has noticed that there is a shift in the why behind accessibility. Basically, when we look at my table, we've got two different motivations for starting an accessibility program listed. One is fear of a lawsuit or compliance, basically. And the other is creating better customer experiences for everybody. So in 2019, 36% of companies said that they feared a lawsuit. They feared not meeting compliance. And only 24% cited creating better customer experiences for everyone. But just a year later, in 2020, 41% of companies cited compliance as a motivation. But in 2020, creating better customer experiences shot up more than 37% to 61%. And the question is, what changed in 2020? Well, I think we can all know that the pandemic, first and foremost. Also in the United States, there is a rise in global attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then a desire by employees to really, and I think employers should take note that a lot of new employees to the workforce really want to work for companies that reflect their values, and also that these values are reflected in their experiences. So, an accessibility adventure. I'd like to tell you a story about an adventure I went on with a band of merry pirates from GREYSHORE Consultancy. We call ourselves pirates because they're always up for new adventures. On my slide is an image of a pirate ship. It's sailing the seas with the GREYSHORE logo at the back of the boat, suggesting that we're giving sail to the ship and pushing Prometric, whose logo is in the front of the ship. GREYSHORE is a consultancy. We focus on cloud adoption, product and platform development. Fundamentally, we believe that digital modernization, product innovation, diversity and enablement begin with us, with people. In March of 2020, I joined Prometric, and they are headquartered here in the United States. They do operate in 160 different countries. Prometric has a business of assessing people through exams. And just setting the scene here for why we were there, when GREYSHORE first started with Prometric, 90% of their revenue came from people taking tests in physical test centers. I'll just let that sink in for a second, because in 2020, with COVID, that presented a major revenue issue for them. So what we ended up doing is the GREYSHORE team went in to help their product team, the ProProctor team. This was the team that was going to be responsible for replatforming this legacy remote proctoring product that they had to now accommodate and support Prometric through the COVID pandemic. We worked with Twilio to develop their remote proctoring product, and I have our Twilio case study linked in the PDF if you have that. Okay, in the beginning, working with Prometric, one of the things we decided to do was accessibility heuristics evaluation. And we wanted to demonstrate to Prometric, one, the depth of information that we could provide about the products we were evaluating, but also that we truly believed accessibility practices were key to digital transformation, right? And so accessibility heuristics really provide a very useful framework for evaluating both existing apps or designs for accessibility barriers, issues. If you are Googling heuristics, I understand. If you're not a designer, I understand. Heuristics, these are kind of broad rules of thumb drawn from UX. For us, accessibility heuristics are drawn from the technical standards of WCAG, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And this framework was really designed by DeQ's Denis Boudreau and his team of accessibility UX experts. And they designed this to help companies shift left, right? Shift accessibility left to design. And that way you can evaluate your wireframes before you even send it off for development. And that, when you shift left like that, accessibility costs much less for everyone. So in this example, I know it's hard to see, but for my designers, you might recognize it. This is Stark. Stark is a tool that the GREYSHORE designers use. It's a vision simulator. It's displaying right now. It's selecting different types of color blindness and trying to simulate what that might look like with the design that you have. I used accessibility heuristics a little bit differently because I wasn't just using it for the design phase. I am comfortable working in code and looking at code. So I actually pulled some checkpoints in addition to the design accessibility heuristics. I pulled some checkpoints outlined by the Accessibility Roles and Responsibilities Mapping Project, or ARM. And if you have not heard of that, please go check out their site, their project. They have a lot of different wonderful checkpoints for content authors and visual designers, interaction designers, as well as developers, as well as product managers. So definitely take a look. So I kind of created my own thing to really evaluate an existing app. And these are the different steps, that I followed to evaluate this application for Prometric. The first thing is I defined the scope. I looked at the application and I picked a couple of user flows, a couple of custom widgets that got a lot of user traffic. I chose my tools to evaluate the application. In this case, what I was going to show you again was the Axe Dev Tools. When you scan a page using their browser plugin, you'll get a series of errors that you can click into. It will give you the location of the error in the code. It will tell you what the error is. It will give you more information. And then you can share it. And if you click on their share feature, it'll create a URL that you can then embed that URL in a story and just build out your backlog of accessibility defects. Don't leave them there to die. Have a plan for how you're going to deal with them, just like you do with any other defects. But a really, really useful tool, again, for building out that backlog. Define a ranking scale. For me, I just used a simple kind of pass or fail, and then evaluate and prioritize. And again, you can either build out your backlog, or in my case, I was using it as a tool and generated a report about their application. So here, I'm sorry, I know it's hard to see. So basically, one of the most surprising takeaways from my evaluation was the realization that no user who either relied on keyboard-only interactions or who relied on screen readers could use this application. They would get stuck and they would be prevented from being able to use this application fully. So for example, I have a row of icon buttons, right? And you can see they have tooltips to tell you what they are. On hover, new folder, refresh the item tree. Unfortunately, they were coded as links and they didn't have link text. So a screen reader going through these buttons, they wouldn't announce anything other than it's a link, right? The images, there's 3 images at the bottom that you can slightly see, but basically highlighting different focus states, a light blue, a yellow, a gray. None of them are unified, and none of them have significant color contrast for you to be able to follow. Okay, so one of the biggest obstacles to building a sustainable digital accessibility program is avoiding being overwhelmed by all the things, right? You know these things need to be done. You've got a list of all the things that you're doing, all the things that maybe teams are doing. It's pretty disorienting when you start thinking about how to integrate all of these individual actions and really push your company forward, right? So you want to take a look at digital accessibility maturity models. They are a really good tool for helping you evaluate your organization's level of commitment to accessibility. They're also really useful tools if you're trying to create a roadmap to better accessibility. And I really want to give a big thank you to Glenda Sims, who I called one day. She's over at DeQ, and I just unloaded on her all of these things that I was worried about or that I was doing or how do I move things forward. And she sat there for an hour and walked me through the conceptual framework. And I have to say it really brought me peace because it gave me a visual to be able to map things out, what I was doing, where I wanted to go. So if you're not sure what a maturity model is, basically in business, it defines how mature an organization is in addressing a business problem. So for us, accessibility or lack thereof is the business problem. And depending on who's designing the model, there's various levels. And I have a couple on my slide. The first one is Gina Ballwalker's accessibility maturity model, initiating, establishing, and scaling. I do have a link in the PDF to her workshop on this maturity model, so please check it out. It's fantastic. The other image I have is a maturity model by level access. I have linked a series of blog posts by author Sherry Bernie Haber, BYRNE-HABER. And I tell you that because you should follow her on LinkedIn. I also have it linked in my PDF, but follow her on LinkedIn. She is an accessibility architect at VMware, also identifies as a person with disabilities, and she is very well known in the community, and I learn so much from her every day. Okay, accessibility maturity categories. These are just basically, and on my slide I have the mind blown emoji, right? Because again, it is very overwhelming to figure out where to piece all the individual actions. But these different categories are a great starting place to think about where to map the individual actions. And then you, along with your team or your company, will build out an accessibility program, and you're going to define benchmark points for different maturity levels for each of these categories. And I want to finish my presentation talking about agile accessibility practices. I have on my slide an image of Dylan Barrel's Agile Accessibility Handbook. He is over at DeQ. And I really highly recommend this to anyone who's interested in how to disperse the responsibilities of accessibility across an Agile team. It is not just the QA's responsibility. It's not the developer's responsibility or just them. It's not just the designer's responsibility. I mean, heck, we need to go all the way to the product owners, to the stakeholders, right? So this book is really good, and also represents how my team handles accessibility. We at GREYSHORE recognize that it isn't just one person who, quote, does accessibility. Certainly, I represent an advocate, an accessibility advocate. You kind of seen maybe this phrased as like an accessibility champion in other businesses that have accessibility champion programs. But basically, we understand that everyone has a role to play in making accessibility happen, making it sustainable, making sure that you're not regressing and introducing more accessibility issues, even as you're remediating others. So 4 areas that we I started the accessibility journey with Prometric started with compliance and responding to an audit for WCAG. And the danger of responding to an audit is that it becomes a checklist of items that you try to remediate. But what we did instead was integrate accessibility requirements into our Agile ceremony. So for example, my product experience team, Dana, Marjani, Christina, Jenny, they were working really closely with Prometric's product owners to groom epics and features and even stories with accessibility concerns at the forefront. We put it in our story templates. So when developers are walking through stories and grooming the stories, we're asking, is this keyboard accessible? Is this screen reader accessible? Right? Is this visually accessible? Our quality assurance person, Simone, she was always sure that before a story kicked off, put into active status, that developers understood their accessibility requirements and that the accessibility requirements were always in the definition of done. And then Larissa Metz, as our team leader, technical leader, she always made sure that we were working really closely with our design team. So, we would kick off a story and talk to the designers because our designers were integrated in almost every ceremony we had. So we're kicking off, we're reviewing the requirements, and we're talking to the designers about what we need to accomplish. Then as we're moving through, we've got a story in the active phase. Once again, as a developer, we're talking with our designers, showing them what we're doing before we even get to QA, right? QA should be paying attention to a lot more complicated stuff than color contrast. That's what we need to resolve early in the process. That way they can focus on other elements of accessibility barriers. I know I'm tight on time. I've got 3 more things real quick. Bridge roles. You always want to have a bridge role. So you've got designers, you've got developers, you've got product owners. Where I felt like GREYSHORE really excels is that we recognize the value of people who bridge teams. So as an application developer, I sat on the application developer team. I did my stories with the app dev team, but I also sat with the design team and our product experience designers. And that way, accessibility responsibilities and requirements in particular did not get dropped between as we move from design to development. Responding to compliance, another catalyst, compliance being the catalyst, is we help Prometric set up a design system. Erica Kastner and the team set up this wonderful design system using web components so that everyone across the enterprise, whether you're Angular, React, or Vue, whatever you're using, can access the design system. We use Storybook as an opportunity to document our accessibility guidelines and also to do some basic unit testing in Storybook. So I have lots of links in my PDF if you want to learn more about how to do that. And where I would like to end is just that we developed empathy. We centered disabled people's experiences always. So for example, going into a sprint demo, if I had a component that didn't meet, had to be remediated, I wouldn't start off with the technical remediation. I'd start off with the problem that my user was having, not being able to use the application, and then go down to the technical resolution and that it was fixed. But you always want to center people with disabilities, and you want to develop that empathy and make it make remediation and make accessibility program development about more than just a checklist of audit items. And this is the end. If anybody has any questions, if you are interested in digital transformation, by all means, reach out to the lovely Paul, a wonderful mentor, and I have the email for GREYSHORE link there. If you are new to technology, please join me at QC Bytes. We have a fantastic program going with the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library. If you are a developer or designer, really anyone involved in technology, you can also become a certified professional in accessibility core competencies and evangelize, right, for better products, more accessible products. And then Considering Ally is my platform where I'm going to be, blogging and presenting other types of training. Thank you.